this week is a shift. It's a real demarcation, and it's stepping into the wheelhouse that I'm really like the most personally, I guess, comfortable with. Like that's been so meaningful to me in my own practice. It excites me. Everything that we've done up to this point, especially for those of you who've been with me from the beginning, all of it is the resources that you need to ground yourself in your body, to move the energy through the gross body, to begin to understand and to observe some of the subtleties, as well as understanding the philosophy of these practices, so that we have a really strong root, a strong foundation, because where we're going now requires more intuition. We're dealing with the subtle body. It's more subjective. It's also acknowledging the power of mysticism, meaning that direct knowledge with God that is ultimately attained through direct experience. And that direct experience includes meditation. It includes intuition. It includes contemplation. And that direct experience isn't just for some and denied others. It's really a product of the work that we do. And so I'm a big believer in mysticism, but not in a woo-woo way, in a way that's very practical, and where there's skills that can lead us into a more direct relationship with God. Now, you can go back into some of the replays and listen to when I talked about Tantra. I started to delve more deeply into spirituality and that connection between the Shiva Shakti energies. But now I'm going to try to contemporize it a bit as we go forward. So this week I'm going to be focusing on mysticism, the subtle body. That includes the Koshas, looking at the Nadis as well as the Chakras, the energetic system within the body. But it's going to be a broader overview, because next week and then up until the very end of this particular module, I'm going to be focusing on each individual chakra, and I'm going to be designing sequences to target those particular chakras, as well as asking very specific questions to help you to reframe your narratives. So the first thing that I want to talk about today is something that, again, is very subjective, but going forward, I'm going to be talking more about God. And God, the conversation around God can be really tricky, because often it's so aligned with religion, and my conversation is not that. Therefore, we have biases and belief systems, prejudices that are based on our upbringing, our conditioning, our traditions that tell us what God is and what God is not. Because it's subjective, I can only talk about my experience. If you've read my book, you'll know more about my, at one point, very complicated relationship with God, being raised both in a Jewish and in a Catholic household, but meaning not my household, but my environment. My parents were agnostic, bordering on atheists. But man, they loved a good holiday. So we celebrated everything that gave us a gift, but it was completely devoid of any religion. That was something that my parents encouraged, that we discovered for ourselves if we cared to. And I cared to. And so my relationship with God is really hard earned. And even that word God came from many years of rejecting it, because to me, God was something that I picked up from my environment that was patriarchal and judgmental and damning and, quite frankly, cruel, especially to people like myself that were curious about life and willing to be, if you will, bad or naughty. What I internalized, though, was that if you're bad or naughty, there's going to be a price to pay. So for a sensitive child like myself, it wreaked all sorts of havoc, because I didn't have any examples of spirituality beyond this Judeo-Christo, these philosophies that did not resonate within my soul. And it took a lot of time and experiences, and chapter 1 of my book certain events in my life that helped me to understand and reclaim a relationship with the divine. That's very unique to me, but it really spoke to my soul. And ultimately, it's God is truth and love, and God exists within all moments, within all, and every single moment is ultimately divine, including the moments that are bad or naughty or even perceived of as wrong, that there's not a single moment that God doesn't rest in. What needs to shift within ourselves is our perceptions to each and every event, and to also watch our own judgment. But there is a level of illumination that is accessible in every single moment because we are products of that divine. And the only thing that blocks us from the power of that divinity is our trauma, our limiting beliefs, our upbringing, our some scars, our conditionings, all the things that I've been teaching you about up to this point. The false identification, the asmita, the avidya, the spiritual ignorance, all the ways in which we let the external world pull us for self-definition and validation, and that we mistake that small self for the true self. So everything that I've been talking about is fodder for this deeper work. How do we reinterpret those moments? How do we see God in those moments, especially in the moments that broke our hearts, where we experience loss and overwhelming grief? Those moments where we were betrayed, deceived, those moments where we were abandoned or rejected. How do we find God there? See, the yoga practice teaches us, and this is what I've been also sharing for so many months now, that everything is connected, that there is no separation, that all the problems in the world exist because of this sense of division, these binaries of right, wrong, good, bad. And the way in which we begin the process of healing this separation that exists out there is to first identify the ways in which we embody that separation within us, the way in which we are separated, feel separated from the divine, the way in which we feel separated from each other, the ways in which we are attached to our personal narratives, haven't yet been able to reconcile those events. And as a result, we are holding on to the resentments towards another, creating separation between us and them, or us and the bigger spiritual picture to why things happen as they do. That's the suffering that leads to separation. This is a process, as I've talked about, if you listen to that talk I gave in the very beginning of this module, that this process takes time. The shadow is the impulse to move too quickly to forgiveness, if you will, or to apply spiritual principles onto something that we haven't yet connected to the psychological impact or the emotional resonance. Often that's called spiritual bypass, and I'm very victim of that, especially because I have so much information and I'm a dissociator. So I can often tell you how I feel or tell you what the right true thing is without actually feeling it or being able to actually implement it. And I think that that's true for so many of us on the spiritual path when we start to get access to these resources and learn a couple of things, that we use it to actually avoid or bypass our big feelings. And so in the work that I'm inviting you to do is that we'll get there to spiritual reconciliation. We'll get to that place where perhaps, maybe not in this module, but in life, if you keep doing this work, where you will forgive yourself, where you will forgive others, where you will be able to stay calm and centered and grounded and mature, even in conflict and in overwhelm, where your body won't get triggered or time travel to go back to when you felt those original insults or assaults. But you can't get there until we recognize within our bodies the narratives that we tell ourselves are true, the ways in which we've been attached to those narratives, the impact that those stories have had on our perceptions, and how those perceptions continue to influence our reality today. and keep us stuck in our ego, and then, of course, in deep suffering. And so, understanding God, your relationship to God. Now, let me put it this way also, in the work that I do and the way that I've been taught, just FYI. You can have a strong spiritual practice and still be an atheist if you believe in truth and love. If your commitment is to truth and love. If everything that you do is to get a sense of the ways in which we are all bound by that truth and love. You don't have to use the word God. You don't have to use any of it. But if you want to, if you need that kind of, just something to attach yourself to, whether it's Jesus Christ or Muhammad, Yahweh, whatever it might be for you, that's all well and good. But the work that I do is teaching us that God in which we seek is already within us, and we're just awakening to it. And again, if you go back into a lot of my other talks where I talk about the Prakriti and Purusha and talk about Tantra, of course, I break that down in terms of yoga speak. I'm just trying to contemporize it a little bit now. So going forward, it's to really look at what is your relationship with God, truth and love. How does truth and love reveal itself in your life? And how do you withhold that truth and love? How has that truth and love been withheld for you? And what is the trauma that has been caused within your own psyche because of that disconnect? And how is that trauma being played out in the other people in your life, especially those who are a big part of your personal narrative? And so over the last few weeks, I've asked you to look at your personal narratives, like look at your stories of heartbreak, your stories of loss, your stories of abuse, your stories of addiction, all the different shadowed aspects that have brought you to this moment in time. A launching pad for that is like if you and I were to go out to lunch and you wanted to like tell me the thing, that story that you're still like kind of carrying, perhaps just wanting to talk about or wanted feedback, what would that thing be? And because like as a friend, like take spirituality out of it, take the fact that I'm a teacher out of it. As a friend, I might be like, oh my God, that son of a bitch, I can't even believe it. You were so right. I might like go to the side of cheering you on, making you good, making that person bad or wrong. But as a sister on the path, as a teacher, what I am going to say is that ultimately, every single moment on our path is divine and awakening us up to spiritual maturation, that we are here to learn and to grow, and that every player on a karmic level has been here to hold a mirror up to you, to reflect back to you the places in which you were disconnected from God. And the truth is that person and you, energetically, your wound, their wound, came together to do really deep spiritual work together. Whether or not they get it is ultimately none of your business. Your work is to stay on your side of the street and to recognize the ways in which your own unresolved traumas have influenced your attachment to that person, or your attachment to the identity that that person held up to you, whether it was raga or dvesha, something that brought you pleasure or something that brought you discomfort, but how your ego was attached to the dynamics of that relationship. And in essence, that person was ultimately doing the best they could with what little they knew, based on their own trauma and the lack of skills that they had to deal with their own big feelings. And they acted out in this dynamic, as did you. So ultimately, you both came together to do deep work, to learn. You brought each other a lot of gifts. And if you're holding on to a resentment towards that person, you're creating the separation. It's creating you suffering. They've moved on. So how do you cut that cord with love? Doesn't mean you date them again. It doesn't mean you hang out for lunch. But it does mean you have to see a bigger spiritual picture to why things happened as they have. Give them back to God. Give you back to God. And grow, not in spite of that experience, but because of it. That's what I would say to you. as your spiritual sister or friend or teacher. The other enables us to stay in our ego. The other empowers us to move on. And it doesn't mean we don't feel the grief. We need to feel the grief or the rage, because it's all energy in our bodies. We've got to discharge it. But we also have to begin the process of seeing, like, well, what did we learn? Did we learn patience, acceptance, self-love? Did you learn boundaries? Did you learn forgiveness? All of that is part of the grace that lets us move on. So, and helps us to know God. It helps us to know truth and love and embody that truth and love. So going forward over the next 7 weeks, and then we've got the big, the retreat that kind of like, ties it all up even more. Each week we're going to unpack a different chakra that's going to help us to begin the process of reframing our narratives, moving from the gross all the way up to the transcendent. And I'll talk about that in a moment. All right, so you kind of have a sense a little bit of where we're going to be going forward. This demarcation moment. You've got, I hope, the skills to stay in your body, to breathe, to focus on sensation, to notice dissociation, to notice any triggers or reactivity when you're time traveling, understanding the mind-body connection, all of that. So what we're going to be grounding ourselves in this week is understanding the energetic body, beyond the physical body, the energetic body, the subtle body, the causal body. And we start by understanding the koshas or sheaths. We can understand the koshas. It was funny, I should have brought it. My mom just gave my granddaughter those Russian nesting dolls. Like there's a bigger one and you open it up and there's a little one inside, and inside these nesting dolls that she had gotten from Russia, which I'm sure Alita's going to break in 4 seconds. But nonetheless, I bring this up for a reason, because the sheaths are kind of like that. They're these layers that move from the grossest to the most subtle, that surround or encase our soul. These sheaths interpenetrate, also like an onion, and it's ultimately a map that leads us to consciousness. And over the past months, we've been working with the koshas, I just haven't been talking about it. The koshas are the Annamaya kosha, the Pranamaya kosha, the Manomaya kosha, the Vijnanamaya kosha, and the Anandamaya kosha. And I'll break that down a bit. So the Annamaya kosha is the kosha that we've really been focused on, especially in that first module, the body and beyond. It's the physical body, the food sheath. The element is earth. This sheath includes our bodily systems, our DNA, our cells, our organs, the health of our physical body ultimately influences our ability to experience the other sheaths as it moves from the grossest to the more dense. And so practices like asana, or having a very a healthy, integrated, whole diet, these are things that help to strengthen your relationship with the Annamaya kosha, with that outer layer. And then we begin to work inward. The next layer is the Pranamaya kosha, which is the energy body. It's the vital sheath. It is the water element. Prana, which is, I taught a whole bunch on prana at some point, so I don't want to go all the way back to what it is, but in a nutshell, it's our life force. That vital energy. Prana contributes to the functioning, the systems functioning of our entire body, and then therefore our life. Prana is also known as chi, and we cultivate that prana through the air that we breathe, through pranayama exercises, meaning breath control or breath restraint, which affects our state of mind, or it is indicative of our mind. So that's the pranamaya kosha, going a little bit more inward. Now these koshas, again, they interpenetrate. So it's not like you've got one and then the other and then the other, and they're separate from each other. They bleed into each other, which is what is ultimately ideal. The third sheath is the manomaya kosha. Mano means mind, and that's the mental sheath, the emotional body. It is the fire element. So here in our mind is where we process our thoughts, our emotions. The manomaya kosha controls the body, controls the senses, controls our ideas. Essentially, it's the layer that feels, remembers, and processes. Then we have the This kosha is dependent on both the annamaya and the pranamaya kosha for it to function properly. Remember that interdependence. Then we've got vijnanamaya kosha, and that's the vijna is knowing. So this is the intellect, the intuitive sheath. It's the air elements. It's the wisdom or the knowledge of the body. It holds integrity, values, intuition. It's different than the manomaya kosha, the mind, which includes like mental or emotional, what's the word, acuity? Is that the right word? Acuity? Vijnanamaya is wisdom that transcends knowledge. All right? It's kind of like when we talked about avidya. There's there's spiritual ignorance. This transcends that. This is when we start to move towards that understanding, that true knowing. And then finally, we've got the Anandamaya kosha, which is the bliss body. The element there is ether or space, and this is the innermost kosha, right? That surrounds the soul, the center of consciousness, the Atman. It's universal consciousness. It's our access portal to God. So the physical body is linked to the emotional mental body by the energy body, okay? Emotions trigger the central nervous system, which then connects to the physical layer, the annamaya kosha. This impacts digestion, your organ and body systems. What's important to know is there are 72,000 channels or nadis that connect your mental, and emotional layers to the physical layers through the chakras. All right? So this is why this all connects. The koshas, these sheaths, are interdependent. There are practices that we do, and it includes, by the way, it's all within the 8 limbs of yoga. The 8 limbs of yoga all connect with the various koshas. So we understand the pathway that helps us to move from that grossest energy to that more transcendent energy. What's important to note, if the koshas relate to our states of awareness, and that includes like waking, dreaming, and sleeping, it also relates to our 3 bodies. And those 3 bodies are the gross, the subtle, as well as the causal. I'm not going to get too much into this today, but I think what's important to note is that the astral and the causal bodies, they remain together at our time of death. So the physical body perishes, but the astral and the causal body, the subtle body, it moves on. But I think I'll get into that another time. Okay, so I'm hoping that you're understanding. So we've been working with the physical body. We've been working with, most certainly, that vital sheath, the pranamaya kosha. We've been into the manomaya kosha, been looking at the mind through svadhyaya, that self-study, reflecting on our thoughts, noticing the sensations. From this point forward, we're going to utilize all that, but we're going to start to go deeper into the Vijnanamaya kosha and the Anandamaya kosha to look at that wisdom, why things happen as they do, without having to unpack it. Unpacking it is in the Manomaya kosha. Embracing it, accepting it, surrendering to it is in the Vijnanamaya kosha. All right, so we got the koshas. I'm going to put them over there. Like I mentioned, there are nadis. You want to think of the nadis or channels kind of like, the vascular system, all right? A network of vessels that distribute blood through the body via, the pump, the heart. Lymphatic system, very similar, a network of vessels, except that it doesn't have a pump that pulls everything through the lympha, the fluid of the body. So it becomes more stagnant. We rely on exercise and deep breathing to help move that through. There's the third thing is the nadis, which you cannot see. But it operates very similarly to that network of vessels within the vascular system and within the lymphatic system. 72,000. These nadis distribute prana through the body. There are 3 main channels of 3 main nadis in the body. There is the Sushumna, the main channel that runs from the very base of the spine all the way to the top of the head. I talk about this earlier on, maybe when I did the Kriyas, or maybe even in Tantra, I cannot remember. But I already kind of broke this down. Main channel, Sushumna, that runs through the center. To the left is the Ida, IDA. And it's associated with the moon as well as the right side of the brain and the left side of the body. Then there is the Pingala or the Mangala. I think depending on where you want to place the accent, but Pingala on the right side, which is associated with the sun, and it affects the left brain and therefore the right body. The Ida is archetypally the feminine. It's receptive. Whereas the Pingala represents archetypally the masculine, activity. Shiva Shakti And then you've got that main channel, which is, again, pure consciousness. In Kundalini, it's represented as a snake that coils around the very base of the spine. And our work is to awaken the Kundalini energy, to move matter into consciousness. As we awaken that Kundalini energy, the energy from the Ida, the energy from the Pingala, move away from the center channel, the Sushumna, and then cross over the Sushumna. At that point of intersection is now housed a chakra, okay? So, starts at the base, it crisscrosses, chakra, right here, chakra, here, chakra, chakra. It actually skips over the third eye and then it cuts right to the top of the head because the Ajna chakra and the Sahasrara chakra are so connected, so that for whatever reason, the energy channel comes here, but two chakras are formed. And I'm going to break down these chakras in just a moment, but I just want you to understand. So these chakras are vortices of electromagnetic energy that line the length of the spine. Each chakra spins at a very particular rate. The spinning of that chakra determines the way in which the prana gets distributed through the physical body. If that chakra is blocked because of trauma, limiting beliefs, the ego, constructs, all the things that we've been talking about, your personal narratives, if that chakra is blocked, the energy either runs what's called deficient, too slow, or excessive, too fast. Either way, there is now a block in the chakra. When that prana is not being distributed properly through the body, that causes energetic congestion, if you will. Congestion. These blockages cause tension, can contribute to an impact in our immune system, our central nervous system, can make us ill, can cause disease. And so what's important then, and I'm hoping that you're starting to understand this intersection, our work then is to understand each individual chakra, the body parts that are impacted by the chakra, and the narratives based on its vibration that it holds onto and how it influences our own story. And the work that we need to do via asana, mantra, mudra, pranayama, svadhyaya, self-study, and ultimately, forgiveness in time, letting go, that's going to help to regenerate this energy and is going to help us to reframe our narratives and heal. How it connects also to a lot of the work that we've done, the more practical work, I've talked a little bit about that vagus nerve that runs through the body and the way in which that vagus nerve communicates information from the brain to the body, from the body to the brain, and how it roots us from deep within that brain stem all the way down into the rectum. Well, there are nerve ganglias. I hope I said that word right. Ganglias. Like, if you can imagine, here's the nerve, and then there's from that nerve like a little I don't know, I keep waving my fingers, but just like, can you picture it? Like just an extension of nerves, like a nerve bundle that extends. Within each ganglia that extends from that vagus nerve happens to correspond with the individual chakras, the placement of those nerve ganglia. So there is a direct physiological manifestation to where it houses these invisible energetic vortices. So the chakras distribute the prana, the life force, through the body via the nadis. Where the prana can't flow freely, our mental and physical health is affected. All right, so that's what's important to note. So when trying to integrate the koshas, it's important to understand the impact that the energetic system, the chakra systems, have on both our physical health and wellness, the Annamaya kosha, as well as our ability to cultivate intuition, wisdom, the Vijnanamaya kosha, and how all of that blocks then our connection to bliss and to the Atman, to our soul. The chakras are the Muladhara chakra at the very base of the spine, the Svadhisthana chakra, which is located right here below the belly button. Above the belly button, right at the solar plexus, is the Manipura chakra. At the heart center is the Anahata chakra. At the throat center is the Visuddha chakra. Right here at the center of your brow is the Ajna chakra. And here at the top of the head is the Sahasrara chakra. The first three chakras relate to our physical world, to the literal, logical, non-abstract world where the energy is at its most dense. The upper chakras is where we relate to the abstract, the etheric, to beauty, to poetry, to expanded reality, to intuition. We tend to think we want to live up in these higher chakras, and we know people who do. When those chakras are so kind of elevated and open, yet they can't pay their bills. They have a hard time maintaining their relationships. They can be flaky and unreliable, right? We also know people who are very connected to the lower chakras, responsible, reasonable, practical, but have no sense of the fantastic, no sense of imagination, of knowing, of connection, of magic. Our work, it's not just to me, and again, I should clarify this. All this work is creative, it's subjective. I'm teaching you based on the relationship that I have to magic, to mysticism, to yoga, to God. It doesn't make it right. I'm sharing with you a truth that has worked for me, that for whatever reason, my soul just screams yes. What I believe, it's not a matter of just moving matter into consciousness. It's also bringing heaven into earth so that we can show up in our parenting, in our work relationships, in the physical world, centered, loving, authentic, truthful, grounded in the here and now, and yet always seeing the divine in each and every moment. When we're bringing heaven into earth, it means that we're going to care about the collective. We're going to see that God in all, not just within ourselves. We're going to understand the complexities of the human experience and have a lot of empathy as people fight within themselves to come back into wholeness. And we're going to feel the impulse to serve. Because to not serve means that we are turning our back on the suffering that exists within mankind, and that leaves us complicit to that suffering. And so this is the way in which, to me, it's a very holistic experience. Doing this inner work is what prepares us to show up in the world healthier, psychologically healthier, emotionally healthier. The first chakra is related to home, health, safety, family, our community, our tribe, the connections that we have to our ancestries. It holds the trauma that's related to birthing difficulties, any major death, illness, or surgery, parents who have divorced or abandoned, parents who didn't have access to education or were impoverished, or historically there was enslavement or enslavers, where there was genocide, the Holocaust, war violence, gang violence, anything that fractures our sense of stability, safety in the world impacts that first chakra. That first chakra distributes prana to the legs, the knees, the feet, the spinal cord, the tongue, not the tongue, I'm sorry, the teeth, the bones, the blood, the solid parts of our body are impacted by that first chakra. So within your narrative, if there is unhealed trauma based on your family, your religion, your culture, if there has been things that have happened within your family that you haven't dealt with or acknowledged, all of that can put us in a first chakra crisis. The first chakra, by the way, right now we're all in a first chakra crisis because of the pandemic, because of racial terrorism, because of political instability, all the things that, remind us of our lack of safety, that give us that sense of insecurity, block that feeling of stability or good health. All of us culturally right now, we're experiencing that. Before we can move further on, we've got to deal with it. We got to grieve. We got to tap into the anger. The shadow that lives within that first chakra is fear. And as a result, when that Ida and Pingala intersect, that very first chakra, which is located right at the perineum, is going to be compromised. Then that affects the second chakra, which is the Svadhisthana chakra. And I'm not going to go into each chakra in its full description. I'm just giving you a little seed planted because we're going to be doing that work a lot later on. Svadhisthana relates to our sexuality, our emotions, our creativity. It impacts our sexual organs, our lower intestinal tract. It most certainly affects our hips. That's why for some, hip openers are so intense, especially if you've experienced trauma, personal or historical or familial, that's related to sexual trauma, sexual abuse, gender abuse, homophobia, transphobia. Families who have experienced where there was sexism, sex workers are some of the examples. Divorce, abandonment, rejection, betrayal, gender violence, right here in the hips, and in the sexual organs, and in the intestinal tract. When we get up to that third chakra, the Manipura chakra, this is about transformation, activation, the power of, willpower. It's the seat of the soul, the magnetic core of our personality and our ego. It's where we move from the collective to individualism. And so it houses also our ego and the way in which we identify with the external world and where we get our self-esteem from, whether it's internal or based on external stimuli or validation. That affects all the internal organs, including the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, the spleen, the large intestines, the small intestines, the kidneys, and the adrenals, the entire muscular system. I find myself working mostly with the third chakra because self-esteem, good self-esteem, relates to our intuition. You cannot trust yourself when you have low self-esteem. So we've got to learn to call our power back so that we can trust that inner knowing, the Vijnana Maya Kosha, so that we can just surrender to the messages that we receive, because intuition is not a gift. It's a skill, and it's one we all develop, and it requires self-esteem. Anahata chakra, anahata is about love and compassion. Altruism, reaching out and taking in, but it also holds the inability to forgive, and bitterness and resentment. The shadow here is unresolved grief. By the way, the shadow in the third chakra, the Manipura, is shame, and the shadow in the second is guilt. The Anahata chakra affects your arms, the wrists, the hands, breasts, lungs, shoulders, scapula. And then we get to the Visuddha chakra right here in the throat. This is about choice, creativity. When the head and the heart are congruent, then the words in which we speak are going to be of truth. When there are blocks in any of the lower chakras, it doesn't matter how intuitive we are, as that truth drops down into that first chakra and then makes its way back up, because of our fear, because of our guilt, because of our shame, because of our unresolved grief, by the time it gets into the throat, that knowing is going to be diluted or manipulated to suit our ego and our needs, and therefore, of course, the shadow of the Visuddha chakra lies. And that then impacts our reactivity, our reality, and really all aspects of the choices that we make are influenced by the Visuddha chakra. It affects the neck, the shoulders, the tongue, the esophagus, the jaw. And so I'm sure at this point you're like looking at your body and feeling into the tension. Remember, there's no separation between the mind and the body. And so we experience these events, these traumas, these relationships. Our body internalizes it. Remember, that's samskara. It lives in these areas, is these deep grooves. And when we get triggered, that information goes into the different chakras, and boom, that block then makes those areas of the body become contracted over time. It's cumulative. That contraction can affect our physical and our mental health and wellness. So I would imagine right now you're thinking, well, what is this in my neck? And I wonder if why I have pain in my left hip, or I just saw my mother this weekend and my left hamstring is just killing me. Or maybe you're dealing with more serious illnesses and maybe perhaps making some kind of connections. I want to tell you that although I do believe that many of our health issues can be directly impacted to internalized emotions that haven't been dealt with, I don't necessarily think all are. So as you're going through these weeks, I want you to just be mindful not to look at perhaps your breast cancer and start to self-beat over your inability to love or forgive, or the lack of self-love that you've had, and thinking that somehow you caused this to happen. I do believe, though, that all illness, no matter what it is ultimately an answer to a prayer, because it can give you the opportunity to have to go inward and find, once you get past the rage and the overwhelm and the grief, to find the meaning, the purpose, the power, regardless of what the end result might be, that can bring you closer to God, closer to healing. So just kind of keep this in mind. I'm not a big believer in magical thinking. I don't like the idea of just assigning all the events into our life to a blocked chakra. I use all of this for insight. All of this to get to that place of why? What could that mean? And I'm also going to go to a doctor, just FYI. I've been having issues with my right hip since I've been online. And there's a gazillion reasons why I could be having issues with my right hip. I have been extremely disciplined with my yoga practice since I was a very young person, hypermobile and really aggressive about my practice up until about 10 years ago. My right hip could definitely be, as I'm getting older, showing me all the ways in which I actually was hurting or manipulating my body because I was unconscious, even within my own mobility. It could be an old injury, which I have many, that is, again, just coming up. It could be because when I'm teaching, as I've said to you guys before, I only do 80% of the practice when I'm with you, because I'm talking, I'm looking at the camera, I'm not really breathing correctly because I'm talking. I have to be careful not to go too deeply into the poses, otherwise it can cause strain. And so sometimes I think maybe that's what caused strain. And That right hip is also representative to other things emotionally and psychologically. And by unpacking both the first and the second chakras, it allows me to have some aha moments. Doesn't mean my pain's going to go away. I still may have to go to a doctor and get an MRI and see what this is. But it might give me insight to make sure that I'm not contributing to patterns of fear or guilt that might be impacting other aspects of my life. All right. So I just wanted to give you that caveat just so you understand where I'm coming from with this work. Finally, we have the last two chakras, the Ajna chakra, which is the third eye, and it relates to intuition, to knowing, to wisdom, to seeing beyond reason. And this affects our eyes. It affects the dermal system, the hormonal system most certainly. It affects our ears, our face. And then finally, the Sahasrara chakra, which is the very top of the head. This is the connective point between the physical body and cosmic consciousness. It's the Anandamaya kosha, the bliss body. It relates directly to that innermost kosha. And it warehouses our prophetic thoughts. It's where we ultimately cultivate a relationship with the divine, with God, that's far beyond ordinary human consciousness. And this affects the whole body, all the koshas, all the systems of the body when it's blocked. And so as we go into the weeks, I'm going to talk about what a deficient quality looks like, what an excessive quality looks like, the traumas that block the individual chakras or challenges or abuses, the affirmations, how we can move through it. I will show you you will experience the yoga poses that are directly related to each individual chakra and the body part associated to release or discharge the maximum tension that's stored in those areas, and how we can begin to relate it to our personal narratives and move towards, and that will happen in Mystic Flow, that Friday class that we have, really looking at forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, and seeing that spiritual picture without bypass. It's going to invite you more into your feeling body, and I'm going to also be giving you a lot of questions for reflection as we go forward into these weeks ahead. All right, so I think that I laid out a lot. You might need to go back and listen to this again or go through the packet that I sent, because I give a lot of this information in the packet to a certain degree. Because so much of this is experiential, that I want it to live in your body rather than in your head. So this week I'm going to be introducing a little bit more pranayama as well as some mantra mudra. Doing work to help you to feel into your energetic bodies a little bit, exploring the subtle body. I'm still going to invite you into observing your body on the mat and looking at mysticism and your relationship with God, and inviting you to define for you what that means. Okay, so I went over time, so we're not really going to have time to go into any kind of a meditation, but we certainly will throughout the rest of the week. But just to anchor this, sit up tall and close your eyes. You're going to come into a mudra that we're going to be working with this week called Bhairava. I'm trying to remember the accent. Bhairava. Your right hand is on top of your left. Your thumbs do not connect the way that normally I do. Your thumbs stay at the side. And you're going to close your eyes. Relax the shoulders. This particular mudra increases our ability to feel into and notice who you are. For when you notice as the witness, you're able to accept all aspects of your humanity. And as a result, gain wisdom and maturity. In your mind's eye, say, I rest in the wholeness of who I truly am. I rest in the wholeness of who I truly am. I rest in the wholeness of who I truly am. Notice your body and any sensation that you feel. Notice the temperature, the pressure, the tension. Notice any emotional response to anything that I said. A sense of calmness, affirmation, relief, or feelings of anxiety, tenderness, even fear. Be present to those feelings, knowing that that is all that they are, feelings, not fact. Be present to those feelings as they color our perception, influence our ability to be present to what is. And then place your palms into prayer. And take a very deep breath in. Exhale it out through the mouth. And together we set our intention for this week ahead by invoking the power and the presence of God within and beyond. We open ourselves to the mystery of it all and embrace the possibility of having a direct experience with God, with truth and love, and allowing that essence of self, that light, that love, that truth, that grace to impact our body, our breath, our mind, our awareness, and our connection with Source. We ask, may we step into the mystery fully and completely and trust that all that is revealed brings us closer to home and to the power of that God within. May this ignite our intuitive knowing. May we see beyond reason. We ask for clarity and commitment and protection, ease, courage, and peace. And then together we offer this blessing with one single Om. Take a deep breath in. And lower your chin to your chest. Open your eyes and inhale. Come on up. Thank you all so much for class. Namaste.